Buongiorno, and welcome back to our Bible study in the book of Job. We are in Job chapter 13 today. We're going to continue on through the discourse of Job as he responds to his friend Zophar. We are, of course, still in our second section of the book of Job, chapters 3 through 37, the discourse between Job and his friends. They're discussing why Job has been suffering. Now, for our characters today, we've got Job, but we've also got Job's three friends. They're not going to be specifically referenced by name, but Job is talking to them, and he's going to be rebuking them quite a bit in this chapter. Our first section today is going to be verses 1 through 12, Job's frustration with his friends. Job had had enough of his friends' accusations, and his response in chapter 13 definitely has more bite to it than some of his responses that we've read previously. Job told them that he knew just as much as them and that his wisdom was in no way inferior to theirs. There was no point for Job to argue with them. What he really wanted to do was speak with God. God would have actual insights for him, unlike his friends. Job called his friends worthless physicians. They were trying to fix him and the situation, but all their skills, all their tactics, all their wisdom was completely useless to him. He said that they were useless physicians who pretended to speak for God, but were actually misrepresenting him. He told them that they would appear wiser if they just stopped talking altogether. He told them that if God were standing there with them, God would rebuke them for what they had already said. And we'll see how God actually responds later on in the book to see if God rebukes Job's friends or God rebukes Job and who's in the wrong. Job said to them, "Your maxims are proverbs of ashes, your defenses are defenses of clay," in verse 12. A maxim is kind of like a proverb, a short statement of wisdom or general truth. And Job's friends were just kind of repeating these, probably things that they had heard in the past about God's nature and whatnot. And Job's basically saying, in light of the facts of my case, these maxims, these proverbs that you're sharing with me that you think are so wise, really, they're not helpful at all. So in section number 2, this is verses 13 through 28, Job expresses his desire to speak with God even more. Job wasn't going to hold his tongue. He wasn't going to be silenced because he actually believed that he was right. And he was ready to accept the consequences of that and put himself into the hands of God, saying, "Though he slay me, I will hope in him, yet I will argue my ways to his face." He wasn't saying this arrogantly as if he was some kind of competition for God. He really thought that he hadn't done anything wrong. After trying to undermine his confidence one after the other, Job's friends failed to shake his belief that he was in fact a righteous man. We see that in verse 18. He had heard the arguments against him, and yet he remained steadfastly convicted. Job says that he would like to speak with God, but he would of course need God to do a couple of things first. The first one, he would need God to remove his hand from him. He needed the oppression, the illness to stop so that he could be of good body and mind to present his case. And then of course, he says secondly, he needs God to conceal his glory so that Job can actually stand in front of God and present his case without being overwhelmed by his terrifying majesty. So again, we see Job is not arrogant. He's not saying that he's God's equal. He's basically saying if I were even to have the opportunity to speak with God, he would have to mask his glory because he's so much greater than me. If he came into my presence, I would die, or I wouldn't be able to say a single word for how amazing he is. He wanted to talk to God and to hear his reply. If God convicted him of sin, then Job was ready to accept that. But he wanted to hear it out of the mouth of God, not just the mouth of his friends. For our application today, I want to admire one of the character traits of Job. Job sets a good example for us of a person who took a stand in the minority for truth. He wasn't willing to change his mind just because his friends were ganging up on him. He wasn't going to be pressured into believing something they didn't actually believe was true. Unfortunately, many churches, many Christians cave to pressure, whether it's pressure from the inside or whether it's cultural pressure from the outside. They adopt views that they used to stand against because they don't want to stand against friends, coworkers, or societal norms. Like Job, we should be willing to hear out the viewpoints of other people, as Job did with his friends, but we shouldn't allow ourselves to be pressured into accepting what isn't true just because a lot of people are promoting it. Well, thank you for joining me for our study in Job chapter 13. Lord willing, we will be back to pick up on Job 14 tomorrow. Until then, have a fantastic day.